The night it all shifted began like countless others, with a bowl of soup placed on the table and the heavy silence of a house where love had long since dried up. My name is Clara Dunn, 24 years old, and on that evening I had thought a simple dinner might pass without conflict. I was wrong. My father's hand flew across my cheek before I even understood what had sparked his anger. He said it was the soup, that I had forgotten the salt, but the truth was far deeper than seasoning. His palm burned my skin, but what hurt more was the way my mother watched with a thin smile, her spoon clinking softly against her own bowl as if my pain were nothing but background noise. The room closed in around me. Their eyes pinned me in place like shackles I could not break. I muttered an apology through trembling lips, but inside me something cracked. I had spent years as their target, a vessel for their frustrations, a puppet of their moods. That night, I crawled into bed with a throbbing cheek and a storm inside me. I thought perhaps the morning would dull it all, that my father would slip back into his role of stern provider and my mother would return to her aloof critiques. But dawn only brought another battle. As the weak sunlight crept through my curtains, I could still feel the heat of his slap echoing beneath my skin. I dabbed concealer across the bruise with shaking hands, staring at the reflection of a stranger in the mirror. A young woman hiding behind layers of makeup. Not because she wanted beauty, but because she needed armor. I could hear the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. When I stepped inside, the smell of sizzling eggs filled the air. My father sat at the table, coffee in hand, his tie already knotted for another day at work. His eyes slid over me as though I were furniture to be inspected and dismissed. "Hurry up," he barked. "Do not ruin breakfast the way you ruined dinner." I nodded quickly, my lip bitten raw, and poured my energy into frying eggs and buttering toast. 6 months earlier, I had lost my job at a marketing firm in the city. Downsizing, they had said. With no savings and no plan, I had returned home believing I would find comfort. Instead, I had stepped back into a cage. My father seized control of my bank account the day I moved back, telling me it was for my own good. He funneled out money that belonged to me, doling back just $50 a week like I was a child begging for allowance. My mother, Barbara, carried her cruelty in smaller, sharper jabs. When I spilled coffee grounds while cleaning the previous afternoon, she sneered that I was useless, too clumsy even for simple chores. The words cut deep because they came from the woman who should have been my protector. As the music began, I walked forward, each step a quiet declaration of survival. I was no longer the girl hiding bruises beneath makeup or the daughter cowering beneath sharp words. I was a woman choosing her own path, her own family. When I reached Jonathan, his hand reached out for mine, grounding me instantly. His eyes brimmed with emotion as he whispered, "You look beautiful." My voice caught when I replied, "You look like home." Unauthorized. Withdrawals. My father guarded that account like a dragon guards its hoard. He never allowed me access. What could this mean? I whispered agreement to meet later that afternoon, lowering my voice as my mother drifted into the kitchen. She eyed me with suspicion. "Who was that?" "Just a friend," I lied, slipping the phone into my pocket, my mind racing with questions I dared not speak. As noon approached, I laid out a crisp salad for lunch. My mother's voice cut through the air with polished cheer as the doorbell rang. She ordered me to answer it. Standing there were her friends, women wrapped in perfume and false smiles, and among them stood Jonathan Price, my old college companion. Seeing him jolted something in me. His familiar smile faltered as he took in my face, the concealed bruise that perhaps was not concealed enough. "Clara," he said gently, "it has been a while." I forced a smile, though inside my pulse quickened. We had shared late nights of study, whispered dreams of city life. Now I felt like a stranger standing before him. I ushered them inside, pouring tea and serving sandwiches, while the weight of my father's warning echoed in my mind. No mistakes. No truth. Jonathan leaned close when no one watched, his voice soft but urgent. "Are you all right? You do not seem fine." The kindness in his words nearly broke me. I whispered that I was fine, but the crack in my voice betrayed the lie. His hand brushed mine, steady and warm, and for a moment I wanted to tell him everything. But then the front door slammed. My father entered, briefcase in hand, eyes sharp as blades. He barked for me to serve the food, and I flinched back into silence. Jonathan's gaze lingered on me with quiet determination, and I knew he saw more than I wanted him to. When lunch ended and the guests had gone, Jonathan texted me, "Meet me at the park." My hands trembled as I typed back agreement. Later that afternoon, I slipped out the back door, heart pounding with equal parts fear and hope. The park was quiet, autumn leaves swirling at our feet. Jonathan's eyes searched mine, steady and insistent. "Tell me the truth, Clara. Do not tell me you are fine." The dam inside me broke. I whispered the truth, my voice shaking. "My parents hurt me, Jonathan. They hit me, they belittle me, they control every piece of my life." He clenched his fists, fury darkening his expression. "That is not right. You do not deserve this." I shook my head, fear gnawing at me. "If I speak out, they will cast me out. My father holds my money. I have nowhere to go." Jonathan leaned closer, his voice low and resolute. "You are not alone. I will help you find a way." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of possibility. Maybe I was not trapped forever. Maybe there was a door waiting to be opened if only I dared to walk through. Later that day, I drove through Mansfield's quiet streets toward a modest office tucked between a laundromat and a diner. The sign above the door read Stephen Hayes, Financial Services. My palms were slick against the steering wheel, my mind replaying Jonathan's promise like a mantra. "You are not alone." I walked inside, the stale scent of old carpet filling the air, and there he was, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a folder already waiting on the desk. "Clara," he said, his tone grave. "Please, sit." He slid the folder toward me, and when I opened it, my breath caught. Lines of numbers swam before me, withdrawals marked in red ink, totals that added up to $75,000. 75,000. My stomach churned as I read my father's name linked to each transaction. Edward Dunn. I asked the question even though I already knew the answer. Who did this? Stephen's expression was grim. "The transactions were traced to your father. He has been siphoning funds for over a year, using your account as a front. If this continues, Clara, you could be implicated in fraud." The words landed like blows. My father had insisted for years that the trust was tangled in legal knots, always beyond my reach. I had believed him, because what choice did I have? Now I knew the truth. He was not protecting me. He was stealing from me. My voice trembled as I asked what I could do. Stephen leaned forward, his tone firm but kind. "You must file a complaint. Protect yourself before it is too late." I clutched the folder, my fingers digging into the paper until it wrinkled. The thought of reporting my own father made my chest constrict. His anger was something I had lived under my entire life. My mother's disdain was another chain that bound me. But Stephen's eyes did not waver. "This is not just money, Clara. It is your future." As I left his office, dusk had fallen. The sky was streaked with purple and gold, but I felt no beauty in it. My phone buzzed with a message from Jonathan. "Are you safe? Can we talk?" His persistence warmed me, anchoring me in a storm that threatened to drown me. I did not reply immediately. Instead, I drove home, hiding the documents deep in my bag. When I stepped through the front door, my mother sat in the living room, flipping through a glossy catalog. "Where were you?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing. "Errands," I lied, slipping past her before she could press further. My heart thundered as I closed the door to my room and locked it. For the first time, I saw a path forward, faint but undeniable. I had proof. Proof of his theft. Proof of their lies. That night I stood in the living room, clutching the bag that held the documents. My father sat in his armchair, my mother by the fireplace, her arms folded like a queen surveying her court. I steadied my breath and spoke. "I know about the trust fund. You stole $75,000 using my name. The air turned sharp as glass. My father's eyes narrowed, his face twisting with rage. You are making up stories, he snapped, his voice dripping scorn. My mother's lips curled in a hiss. Ungrateful. We give you a home, food, and you repay us with lies? Her words tried to pierce me, but I forced myself to stand tall. It is not lies. I have proof. Bank records, transactions. You have been deceiving me for years. My father slammed his hand on the armrest, the sound cracking through the room. You are out of line, Clara. Go to your room before you make this worse. His face flushed red with fury. For a moment I thought he would strike me again, but I turned and walked away, my chest tight but my resolve burning. Upstairs, I dialed the number of the one person I trusted beyond Jonathan. Ellen Brooks, our neighbor, a woman who had always shown me small kindnesses. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm with concern. Clara? What is wrong? I took a shaky breath and told her everything: the trust fund, the confrontation, the fear choking me. There was a long pause before she said, Come over. I have something you need to hear. Sneaking out under the cover of darkness, I crossed the yard to her house. Ellen welcomed me into her kitchen, her face serious. I have suspected something for a while, she said, pulling out a small recorder. She explained that she had overheard my parents arguing one evening through her open window. She pressed play, and their voices filled the room. My father's voice rang sharp. If Clara finds out about the $75,000, we are finished. My mother snapped back. She will not. She is too weak to check. Tears burned my eyes as I listened, my body trembling. Ellen touched my arm gently. There is more, she said. My security camera caught things. Your father shoving you in the driveway. Your mother screaming at you on the porch. Proof of what you have endured. I stared at her, the enormity of it all crashing over me. Why did you not tell me sooner? Ellen sighed softly. I was not sure you were ready. But now you are. She reached for her phone and said she knew someone who could help, a reporter named Richard Moore, who specialized in exposing local scandals. She called him then and there, her voice steady as she explained the situation. His voice came through the speaker, calm but eager. Clara, if you have evidence, I can make sure the truth is told. But you will need to go public. Are you ready for that? I hesitated, fear rising like a tide. The idea of everyone in Mansfield knowing my family's shame made my stomach twist. But Ellen's hand squeezed mine, and I thought of Jonathan's promise, of Stephen's warnings, of the bruises I had hidden for too long. My voice was firmer than I felt when I said, I am ready. That night, as I returned to Ellen's guest room, the recorder's crackling voices still echoing in my ears, something shifted inside me. For the first time, I felt not just anger or fear, but determination. They had called me weak. They had thought I would never fight back. They were wrong. The following morning dawned cold and gray, but inside me burned a new kind of fire. I had spent years walking on eggshells in that house, but now I had evidence in my hands and allies by my side. I tucked the recorder and documents back into my bag, their weight both terrifying and reassuring. When I walked through Ellen's front yard toward my parents' house, every step felt like marching into battle. Inside, the living room was heavy with silence. My father sat hunched over the newspaper, his jaw clenched tight. My mother hovered near the fireplace, her earrings catching the weak morning light. I drew in a shaky breath and spoke clearly, refusing to let my voice waver. I know everything. You have been stealing from the trust fund, using my name to cover your crime. My father's head snapped up, his eyes flashing. That is a lie, he growled. Do not twist things. My mother's lips curled with venom. How dare you accuse us after all we have given you? Her words dripped with practiced cruelty. But I did not back down. I pulled the papers from my bag and placed them on the coffee table. Bank records, proof. Your words are empty now. My father's hand twitched as if he might strike me again, but instead he slammed his fist against the table. You ungrateful little fool. You will ruin this family. Go to your room before you destroy yourself. My chest tightened, but this time I did not obey. I turned away, leaving him to stew in his fury. Upstairs, I locked my door and dialed Jonathan's number with trembling fingers. He answered on the first ring. Clara, are you safe? I told him everything: the documents, Ellen's recording, the reporter. Silence stretched for a moment before he said, I am with you. Whatever comes next, you will not face it alone. That evening, Richard Moore, the reporter Ellen had called, met us at her kitchen table. He was a lean man with a notepad already open, his pen tapping as he listened. Jonathan sat beside me, his hand brushing mine, a quiet anchor. Ellen laid out the evidence: the bank records, the recordings, the camera footage of my father shoving me. Richard's eyes sharpened as he wrote quickly. This is a strong case, he said. Once the trial begins, this story will break. It will shake this town to its core. The thought of Mansfield buzzing with whispers about my family made my stomach churn, but Jonathan squeezed my hand gently. You are doing the right thing, he whispered. His quiet strength steadied me. For the first time, I felt like I was not just surviving but preparing to fight. Back home later that night, the confrontation came fast. My father cornered me in the kitchen, shoving a paper across the counter. Sign this, he barked, his voice low and threatening. It says the $75,000 was a family loan. You sign it, and this all goes away. My mother stood behind him, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. Do not be foolish, Clara. Sign it and move on. I stared at the paper, every nerve in my body screaming to obey, to avoid his wrath. But then I thought of Ellen's evidence, of Richard's determined voice, of Jonathan's promise that I was not alone. I pushed the paper back across the counter. Number. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. His hand rose halfway before falling back to his side, trembling with fury. You ungrateful child, he spat. I will cut you off. No money. No house. You will regret this. But I was already moving. I grabbed my bag, stuffed with essentials, and walked out the front door. My legs shook as I crossed the street, but I did not look back. Edward's threats echoed behind me, but they no longer held chains around my heart. Ellen's door opened wide, her spare room already prepared. You are safe here, she said softly, pressing a cup of tea into my hands. Her kindness steadied me, though the enormity of what I had just done threatened to crush me. That night, lying in Ellen's guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of the day. The confrontation, the threats, the walk away. For the first time, the house I had lived in for years was not mine anymore, but instead of despair, I felt a strange lightness. Leaving meant losing the last shred of security I had clung to, but it also meant freedom. I texted Jonathan, telling him I had left. His reply came instantly. Proud of you, I am here. The next morning, Jonathan came to Ellen's porch. The autumn air was crisp, the trees painted with fire and gold. We sat side by side, my fingers wrapped around a mug of steaming coffee. You are braver than you think, he said, his eyes soft. I laughed shakily. I do not feel brave. I feel like I am falling. He reached for my hand, his grip firm. You are not falling alone. His words hit deep, and for the first time I allowed myself to imagine a future that was not bound by fear. The days that followed blurred with preparation. Richard worked tirelessly, gathering statements, cross-checking records, preparing the story that would expose everything. Jonathan drove me to meetings with lawyers, his quiet presence grounding me. Ellen offered her home as a safe haven, her encouragement reminding me that community could be family too. Piece by piece, the cage my parents had built began to crumble. When the courthouse doors finally opened for me, I stepped inside with trembling legs but a steady heart. The room was filled with whispers and curious eyes, but I focused on the evidence in my hands: the bank records from Stephen, the recordings from Ellen, the footage that showed what words could not. My father sat rigid at the defense table, his jaw tight, his glare searing into me. My mother beside him wore a mask of false calm, but her eyes darted nervously. I took the stand and told the truth. Every word felt like pulling chains off my body. When the recordings played, Edward's voice filled the courtroom. If Clara finds out about the 75,000, we are done. Each syllable was a strike against his facade. The footage of him shoving me, the bank records showing his theft, it all piled up, undeniable. The judge's gaze was stern as hours of testimony painted the full picture. When the verdict came, my breath caught. Guilty. Edward was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to repay the 75,000. Barbara, while complicit, avoided prison, but her reputation shattered before the town's eyes. I met my father's glare as he was led away, but I did not flinch. For the first time in my life, I felt untouchable. Outside the courthouse, the autumn wind carried whispers from the gathered crowd. Reporters scribbled notes, neighbors exchanged stunned glances, and somewhere within that storm of voices, I stood tall, breathing air that felt new in my lungs. Jonathan stepped closer, his presence steady. "You did it, Clara," he said quietly, pulling me into a hug that felt like more than comfort. It felt like safety. His warmth steadied me, though the victory carried a heavy weight. My father was behind bars, my mother's name was dragged through the mud, and yet the echo of their voices still clung to me. Later that evening, Jonathan told me something that made my knees almost give way. "I spoke to my colleagues at the consulting firm in Columbus," he said firmly. "They know what Edward did. They cut him off. No contracts, no deals. His empire is gone. My father had built his reputation on power and respect, but now it crumbled like sand between his fingers." That same night, Richard's article hit the front page of the Mansfield News Journal. The headline blared, "Local couple exposed in trust fund fraud, daughter reveals abuse." The details were stark, each paragraph laying bare the theft, the recordings, the years of control I had endured. Mansfield buzzed with gossip the next morning. Neighbors who once smiled at Barbara crossed the street to avoid her. The bridge club that once welcomed her fell silent when she entered. The circle she had clung to dissolved in whispers. At Ellen's kitchen table, I read the article aloud with shaking hands. "You have changed things," Ellen said, her eyes full of pride. "People are talking. People are listening." I nodded, though the weight of the town's attention pressed down on me. The phone rang the following day. On the other end was Donna West, president of the community board. "Clara," she said warmly, "your courage has inspired us. We want you to serve as an advisor for the Community Trust Fund." The offer stunned me. To move from victim to guardian of resources for others felt like a bridge between what I had lost and what I could build. "You have proven you can stand up to corruption," Donna added. "We need that." When I stepped outside Donna's office, the late morning sun felt brighter. Jonathan was leaning against his car, his smile wide as he asked, "What is the news?" I told him, and his eyes lit with pride. "That is perfect for you. You are going to make a difference." His faith in me stirred something deeper than gratitude, something warmer, something alive. We walked to the park, the same one where I had first confessed the truth to him, and sat on a weathered bench, our shoulders brushing. The sound of children playing drifted through the crisp air. I realized then just how much he had become my anchor, not just in this fight, but in the fragile rebuilding of my heart. Mansfield, once a cage, was slowly shifting into a place of possibility. Back at Ellen's house that evening, I stared out the window at the town's quiet streets. Edward was gone, Barbara was shunned, and I was no longer their prisoner. The offer from Donna felt like a key, unlocking a door I had never known existed. My hands trembled as I traced the edge of the newspaper article lying on the table, its words cementing a new reality. Weeks slipped by in a blur of meetings, preparations, and quiet evenings filled with reflection. Jonathan was there for each step, driving me to interviews, listening as I practiced speaking to the board, holding my hand when the weight felt too heavy. Ellen never faltered in her support, offering a warm home and gentle reminders that I was stronger than I believed. Then came a morning that changed everything again. A letter arrived, the envelope marked with the prison's return address. It was from Edward. His handwriting sprawled across the page, full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. He wrote of regret, of promises to change, of hopes that I might one day visit. My mother, too, had reached out, her voice shaking over the phone as she begged for a chance to make things right. I read their words, my hands trembling, but I set them aside. Their remorse came too late. The shadows they had cast over me would not taint the life I was beginning to build. Barbara soon left Mansfield altogether, her social circle shattered. Whispers followed her until she packed her belongings and moved to Cleveland, leaving behind the life she had fought so hard to preserve. My father remained in prison, his sentence a constant reminder of choices that could not be undone. At first, the loss of family gnawed at me like an old wound, but gradually, it began to feel like shedding a weight I had carried too long. With Donna's encouragement, I launched a nonprofit to help victims of family abuse. We called it Haven. It offered counseling, resources, and a voice to those who had been silenced. Jonathan helped me with the endless paperwork, Ellen connected me with local donors, and Richard wrote a follow-up article that shined a light on Haven's mission. The work was exhausting, but every story I heard from survivors reminded me why I had fought in the first place. One evening, at a community gathering in the town hall, I stood at the podium before a crowd of neighbors. My voice shook at first, but soon steadied as I shared my journey. I lost my family, I said, but I found my strength. No one should live in fear at home. The room erupted in applause, and I saw Donna nod proudly from the front row. Jonathan slipped his hand into mine afterward and whispered, "You were incredible up there." That night, as I walked home through the cool autumn air, I realized something profound. I had not just survived. I had begun to rebuild, to transform pain into purpose. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like a sentence. It felt like a story waiting to be written, one where I was finally the author. The wedding day arrived beneath a crisp autumn sky, the vineyard bathed in soft gold light as rows of grapevines swayed gently in the breeze. The air smelled of earth and apples, a perfect setting for the beginning of something new. I stood in a simple white dress, my hands trembling not from fear but from a joy that felt foreign and fragile. Ellen stood beside me, her smile radiant as she adjusted the veil that fell across my shoulders. She was the one to walk me down the aisle, the mother I had chosen when the one who birthed me had abandoned her place. Guests filled the rows of wooden chairs, familiar faces from Mansfield who had seen my story unfold in newsprint and whispers. Donna sat near the front, her eyes bright with pride. Richard held his camera, documenting not for the paper but for memory. And at the end of the aisle stood Jonathan, waiting with a steadiness that had carried me through storm after storm. As the music began, I walked forward, each step a quiet declaration of survival. I was no longer the girl hiding bruises beneath makeup or the daughter cowering beneath sharp words. I was a woman choosing her own path, her own family. When I reached Jonathan, his hand reached out for mine, grounding me instantly. His eyes brimmed with emotion as he whispered, "You look beautiful." My voice caught when I replied, "You look like home." The officiant spoke, but the words blurred around me. What I remembered were the vows Jonathan spoke, steady and full of promise. "I will stand beside you through every fight, every victory." His words settled deep into me, and when it was my turn, I promised to stand with him, to trust, to build, to never silence myself again. The exchange of rings felt like placing a seal on a future I had once thought impossible. When we kissed, the vineyard erupted in applause, but all I felt was the warmth of his hands holding me steady. The reception glowed with string lights, the vineyard transformed into a haven of laughter and clinking glasses. Ellen raised a toast, her voice breaking with emotion as she called me the daughter she had always wanted. Richard shared a few words about courage and truth, reminding everyone of the journey that had brought us here. Donna hugged me tightly, whispering that Haven was already changing lives. We danced under the stars, Jonathan spinning me until my dress flared and laughter bubbled from my chest. For the first time in years, I laughed without fear of who might hear. Across the tables, I saw Ellen wipe a tear and Richard lift his glass in salute. The absence of Edward and Barbara hung heavy, but it was a silence that felt like victory, not loss. Their shadows no longer reached me here. Later, when the music softened and the guests began to leave, Jonathan and I slipped away to our small downtown apartment. We were still in our wedding clothes, my veil trailing behind me as we stepped inside. The second-hand couch sat in the corner, fairy lights strung along the wall, each detail of the space a piece of the life we had built together. I kicked off my shoes and sank onto the couch, Jonathan collapsing beside me with a laugh. We sat there in quiet reflection, the muffled sounds of Mansfield drifting through the window. I thought of the trust fund money that had allowed me to start fresh, of the nonprofit that had already begun helping others, of the community that had rallied around me. More than anything, I thought of the lesson etched into my bones: family does not justify injustice. Blood is not reason enough to accept cruelty. Jonathan took my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. "We made it," he said softly. I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were relief, the kind of tears that water new beginnings. "We did," I whispered back. "We really did." As I leaned against him, the twinkling lights of Mansfield shone outside our window, no longer a cage but a canvas. The town that had once held me in chains now held my story, my triumph, my future. I closed my eyes, breathing in the quiet hum of life beginning again. For the first time, I was free, not just in body but in spirit. And freedom, I realized, was the most profound kind of love.